gentleman. Now recognize Dr. Burgess for his 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Sheriff, let me just ask you something, because earlier this afternoon, we were at the Central Processing Facility down on Ursula Avenue, and the Deputy Chief Patrol Agent showed us a graphic of where the location of the remains of people who had perished coming across presumably illegally. And sure enough, there were a number of dots along the border, along the river. But it was startling how many dots there were up north toward Falfurrias in your area. Can you help us understand what's going on there?
Yes, sir. What's happening, they're coming across between the port of entries. They're being held in stash houses, which they're not being fed. There's no water. They're providing nothing for their health issue, okay? Then they're traveled up to maybe a mile south of the checkpoint, get dropped off, and they're walking through. They get injured, they get hurt, whatever the case might be. Maybe they get intercepted by law enforcement. They all run different directions. The only one that knows which direction to go is going to be the coyote, the smuggler. So at the end of the day, if they don't get the assistance they need, they're going to die, and it's a slow death. But I must say, though, we have over close to 2,000 placards in Brooks County alone. We have maybe 3 or 4 beacons in Brooks County alone, but they're told not to utilize that by the smuggler. Okay, I think I'm the only sheriff with a morgue in the county, and I'm holding bodies for Zavala County because they don't have a place to hold them. So I think it's important to understand the fact that they're getting smuggled, and they have to pay to get smuggled, and they shouldn't.
Yes, sir. And it's hardly compassionate.
Yes, sir.
As the bottom line. Mr. Archer, let me ask you, you and I have both referenced the Institute for Mental Disease exclusion. When, interestingly, we had Secretary Becerra in front of our committee last Congress, and I asked him a question about that. He actually spoke favorably about perhaps revisiting that. In your opinion, would that be helpful with some of the problems that you're facing?
Yeah, yes, sir, we would. We, at Oceans today, in over half the hospitals we're in and over half the hospitals in Texas, we're the only behavioral health hospital for sometimes 100 miles. And because of a rule that's almost 50 years old on the books, we can't accept Medicaid patients, patients that we're willing to accept, that we have a contract with. And, you know, unfortunately, the behavioral health federal laws are riddled with old rules that point to state hospitals that either haven't existed or have lost beds tremendously over the last 20 years. And so we've got willing providers willing to take patients at accepted rates, and we simply can't because of some of these antiquated rules.
Let me ask you this. What are you doing? We all hear about the workforce issues, and every hospital that I represent will tell me about that. What are you doing to incentivize providers to stay at your facilities?
You know, what I would say is all the above. You know, whatever it takes these days. It's the #1 stressor for us in hospitals, and I'm sure in healthcare and in many industries. You know, the problem is, and the deep-seated problem in behavioral health is, you know, it's now fashionable to say good things about behavioral health, but from a parity perspective, from a payment perspective, a psychiatrist, a therapist knows that they're going to make 20 to 30% less than their peers. So institutionally, we've got a lot of work to do to value the work that they do when they come out of school. One of the most, I think, things that scares me the most is you look at new graduates, you look at new psychiatrists, you look at new therapists. I'm sure many of you may have had a family member or a loved one you know. Try to find one that'll take an insurance. Try to find somebody that'll take your insurance in network. And the problem is that the barriers for behavioral health providers have been stacked so high that a lot of folks have just tapped out and said, hey, we're just going to opt out of taking insurance. And so from a workforce perspective, we are doing everything we can to attract and retain the best and brightest. And part of that is inviting folks in earlier in their career to understand what an engaging career in behavioral health is and how rewarding it can be.
You're right. We don't value it, and as a consequence, it becomes a cash-only business. And certainly Medicare and Medicaid, extremely hard to find a provider who will accept that. Let me just ask you, Mr. Judge, in the few seconds that I have remaining, we've heard a lot about the influence of social media, Snapchat on the sale of fentanyl. But TikTok also plays a role in illegal immigration, does it not?
It does. It does. All social media platforms plays a role in illegal immigration. That's one of the ways the cartels advertise their services throughout the world and convince people to put themselves in their hands to come to the United States. The cartels use all social media platforms.
Well, we're going to have a hearing with TikTok later. Maybe we can bring that up to them. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize Ms. Craig for her 5 minutes of